I'm Steve, and this is This Week with Cars. What you see right behind me, this is actually Barn Sprite number 6. This is the one that was all different colors. This is the one that looked really bad, and it needed a paint job, so this is what I came up with. Now, I know a bunch of my viewers are sports car aficionados, and they probably recognize what I've done here. This car is inspired by Donna Mae Mims' pink Austin Healey Sprite. Donna Mae Mims was a very colorful character, and she loved cars. Her and her husband bought a Yenko Corvette, and she ended up being the secretary at Yenko Chevrolet. Yenko Chevrolet had a racing program, and Donna Mae Mims got involved with that. Her first few races were in a Corvette, and she actually won some. After she proved to be a pretty decent race car driver, she got an Austin Healey Sprite, and all of her racing cars were pink. The Austin Healey Sprite is really important because that is the first car that she won a national championship with. In fact, it was her only national championship. Mims' win in the Austin Healey Sprite is pretty important because by this time the SCCA had been around for 20 years, but no woman had ever won a national championship. And Donna Mae Mims was the first woman to win a SCCA national championship, and she did that in her pink Austin Healey Sprite in the H production class. The Sprite and Corvette were not the only pink cars she had. She also had a Triumph TR3, an MGB, and a Corvair. Now maybe you have never heard of Donna Mae Mims or her pink Sprite before, but you've probably seen the intro to the movie Cannonball Run. If you remember in that movie, there was two girls driving a Lamborghini. The character who is driving the Lamborghini is based on Donna Mae Mims. She actually competed in the 3rd annual Cannonball Run in a Cadillac. Unfortunately, one of the other drivers wrecked the car and she did not finish the rally. Donna Mae Mims loved cars so much, especially her 1979 pink Corvette, that she asked that during her funeral at her visitation that she be displayed in her Corvette for the visitation. Now all of that leads me back to this car. I thought that this was a pretty neat part of sports car history, and Donna Mae Mims' actual pink Sprite does still exist. That car sold at R.M. Sotheby's in 2015 for just over $60,000. Now I'm not trying to make a replica of that car. This car is more of a tribute to her. I felt that she is such a great part of automobile history that through this car, the conversation can be had and her story can be shared with everyone. So far, the only things that I've done to this car since the last time you've seen it is I cleaned out the interior. I did paint the wheels pink and put a new set of tires on it, but this car still doesn't run, and so that's the next thing to do. But before I get to the task of making this run, I'm going to give you a little tour around it. You can see I've put the racing stripes down the center. These are painted on, the stripes are under the clear coat. Now Mims did have a black meatball on the bonnet there. I am planning to put one of those on. All of the meatballs that are on the car, as well as the H production class stickers, those are in vinyl, but the stripes are painted on there. There was a few sets of these medallions, brand new, that came with the car, so I stuck one of those in there. You can see I painted the wheels pink to match the rest of the car. The meatball obviously is where you will display your number when you're at a race or even in autocross. H production was the class that the Sprites ran in back in the day. Just like Mims's car, I have put the red interior back in. Now she did have a red dashboard. This one is a wood grain pattern. I'll just leave that because why change it if it doesn't need to be changed. I've stuck these weird seats back in for now, and it actually does sort of look like a vintage racing bucket anyways. This car already did not have a stock steering wheel in it. This is actually of the style that you would put in an Austin Healey Sprite when you were racing it back in the day. That way you had more room between the seat and the steering wheel, and a smaller wheel is easier to turn. You can see around the back that the stripes do continue. She had her logo, which was Think Pink, on the back here where the license plate would be. That might be something that I might want to add on there. I haven't decided yet. Getting above the car, you can see how the stripes travel over the top. Now, an interesting thing is the stripes ended at the edge of the bonnet. They did not continue onto this cowl piece right here. I'm not sure why they didn't continue the stripes. And she also did not run a full windscreen like this. She ran just a windscreen right in front of the driver. But on this car, for now at least, I'm going to run the full windscreen. Let's get this bonnet up and see where I want to start. Underneath the bonnet, you can see this is still very much Barn Sprite number 6 with all these crazy colors going on under here. I felt there's really no reason to paint the engine bay until the car's running. Maybe I need to pull the engine out anyways, and with the engine out, that would be a much better time to paint in here. So over here, we can see that there is no regulator, and these are the wrong terminals for the original regulator. Also, someone has upgraded the fuse box to 4 circuits. The original one only had 2, so I'm not really sure what's going on with the electricals here. Also, they've done this really strange generator delete here. They had just this pulley system here so that they could run the car without a generator on it. I don't know if they were using this as a race car at some point or they just wanted a little bit extra power. So there's a lot of strange things going on here. So this is going to be a fun one to try to get running. I don't know if I will have all the parts to be able to get this running today, but let's see how far we can get. To run the starter, you would manually pull with a cable on this starter solenoid. These 2 pieces would originally be connected together. There would be a cable coming out of this end, which was held on by the screw onto here, which would then pull that and start the starter. Unfortunately, the end of it is frayed, so I can't put it back down into the sheathing and use it anymore. I'm afraid if I were to cut this off, it wouldn't be long enough to be used anyways. So for right now, I'm just going to have to pull on this in order to make the starter run. And before that, obviously I need a battery. So I'm going to grab a battery, get that set in here, and we'll see if the starter will run at all. Okay, I have a battery installed. Before I try to crank it over, I should see if there's any oil in the engine. Looks like there is, but not much. I think I'll add a quart of oil before I try to start it. Okay, let's pull on the solenoid and see what happens. Well, it cranks over well. Next thing I want to do is check and see if it has spark. Easiest way to do that is to put a spark tester here on the spark lead. So I'll go grab that and we'll try that out. I have my spark tester, but before I can use that, I need to see if we can get power to the coil. I'm not sure what's going to happen when I hit the ignition switch, so I'm going to connect up a multimeter. Just going to hook that up to the coil so that when I flip the switch, I can see if it's energizing it or not. This car is positive ground, so that means that the power going to the coil is actually going to be from the negative side. We can see that this side of the coil is connected to the distributor, so I'd want to put power to the other side, which is this red wire here. It looks like that's not hooked up to anything, so I know that the ignition switch isn't going to do anything, but I can now take this directly to the hot terminal, and then I can check for spark. Right, here we go. So you can see there was no spark there on the spark tester, so the points must be bad. So I'll take the cap off and see what we see in there. Here's the points down here. If I pull the points apart, you can see all the corrosion in between there. So I'm going to clean that up and we'll try this again. Let's take a look at the cap while we're here as well. That actually doesn't look too bad there. A little bit of corrosion, but that'll work. Okay, I've taken my points file and cleaned it up. Got the cap back on. Let's give this a go again. I'll turn the light off so that you can see this better. Okay, you can see I had spark there now. The next thing I need to fire this engine is fuel. And you can see this engine is equipped with a mechanical fuel pump down here. There's a hard line running from the fuel tank up to the fuel pump, and then a hard line from the fuel pump up to this pipe that distributes fuel to both carburetors. So obviously I can't tie into the pipe, but there are these little hoses that run from the pipe to each carburetor. So once I've removed these hoses, I can manually fill the fuel bowls of each carburetor with fuel, and that will give them fuel for at least long enough for us to see if this engine runs. Now you can see I can just hook up some fuel right here on each of these carburetors and get these float bowls filled up. Okay, let's give this a go, see what happens. Make sure I have power to the coil. I'll give it a crank. It's always hard to get these started for the first time. I'm over on this side now. I'm going to try to hold the chokes up while I crank it this time. I can smell it. Seems like it wants to go. Okay, we have fuel and spark, so the thing we're missing is compression. I'm going to take the spark plugs out. I'm going to drop a little bit of oil in there. That'll raise the compression. We'll try this again. Hey, we're on to something. It was trying to start, but now I have too much oil on the spark plugs. I'm going to need to burn that off. Now that the spark plug is clean, this should fire up. Let me get the chokes pushed all the way down. Let's try it again. Still wants to take off, so I think I'm going to leave it right there until I can get these carbs off and go through them. Well, that one took a little bit longer than usual to get all the valves cleared so that it would have good compression to fire up. Now that it starts right up every time. I'm glad I was able to do this without any parts. The next step is to get some parts so that it will run and start from the driver's seat. And of course, I'm sure the entire brake system will need to be gone through. If you want to see more on this car or you like watching videos like this, comment below and click subscribe.